Hello, world. Today, I am so excited because we are talking to Mitchell Wright, the head of marketing at StackBlitz, which is building Bolt.new, one of the hottest AI products on the market today. What I loved about our conversation was that even though we were talking about AI and sort of the future of product development, everything boiled down to communication and how we can extract the most collaboration out of our teams. So, without further ado, let's let Mitchell take it away. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Technically Lit. Today, we have Mitchell Wright joining us. He is the head of marketing at StackBlitz. Is that correct, Mitchell?
Yeah, at Stack Blitz, a lot of people know us more though for our product called Bolt.new. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for calling that out because I was like, I know it's Bolt, but I know it's StackBlitz. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is
Company is Stack Blitz, product is Bolt. It's confusing. We're working on that. There's definitely some confusion in the market there that we need to clear up.
right on. Well, I was looking at your LinkedIn before this, and I don't often get jealous of people's career histories and trajectories, but you've just had such an incredible journey. Can you give us like the highlight reel so far of what your career has been?
Yeah. I, I I guess I'll start real quick just with my education. So I did a master's in information systems. So I always had a bit of a technical background. And while I was doing my master's, I got really interested in digital marketing. And to help pay for my master's, I was doing freelance SEO work mainly, um, as well as some affiliate marketing. So while a lot of my classmates went into tech consulting, I ended up going down a completely different route and was doing digital marketing. And for a few years, right out of school, I was trying to do my own thing. You know, I worked a lot with actually mommy bloggers and was helping them to monetize their blogs, which was a really fun experience. Didn't end up quite making as much money as I was hoping. And so I was like, okay, time for me to go get a job. So um, that's kind of where I started my more corporate part of my career. And I started out at Qualtrics, doing digital marketing there, then ended up at GitLab, where I was doing digital marketing as well. After GitLab, I went to a company called Lambda School, which is where we met, which was great. And there I did a variety of things, including a short stint in product management, but started out doing growth, product management, operations. And then from one of our coworkers at Lambda School, he had gone on to Vercel, and he was actually the one who brought me on to GitLab at the time. So I'd worked with him at GitLab and at Lambda School, and now he was at Vercel. And he said, "Hey, come over here. I need someone who can help me with, operations and marketing over at Vercel." So I went there. Partway through my time there, I actually switched over to the data engineering team. Um, so that was a fun getting back into a little bit more technical of a role. And then in December of 2024, I went over to StackBlitz after they had launched Bolt.new, which was growing like crazy. And yeah, and that's where I'm at currently. So I'm leading marketing and data over there, and yeah, it's been a wild few months. This AI space is it's like nothing I've ever seen before, as far as how fast some of these companies are growing.
Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, like I said, I think very few profiles I get jealous about, but man, that's been some journey. Was there? I think kind of you touched on this at the beginning, and I'd love to dig in a little bit more. But was there a moment when you were like, technology is going to be important for my career and just where I want to go in life?
Well, yeah, growing up, we were one of those weird families that uh, my dad was always obsessed with Apple as a company. So growing up, I feel like in junior high and even high school, Windows was really the dominant operating system. Everybody had a Windows PC at home, and we were the weird kids who had Apple. And so it was like when we would go to school, Apple had a really good education presence, and so there were a lot of Apple computers at school. And like I was at home, and everyone else was like, I don't know how to use this. This sucks. Like Windows is the best. Um, so my dad was always really into technology, and Apple was the thing. And so we we always had like a good computer at home. I remember getting the internet early, and so technology was always a thing I was really interested in growing up. And when I went to college, my brother had been studying computer engineering. So I was like, oh, like that sounds super cool. I want to do that. Until I took my first calculus class. And I was like, no, like I like technology, but I don't know about this math piece. And so I had this idea that I needed to be really good at math in order to do anything in technology. But I remember going to a career fair when I was a freshman and just walking around all the different majors and them talking about what kind of careers you could have going out of it. And I stumbled upon this one called information systems, which was, it was in the business school, and it was sort of this half business, half technology program, and it just really connected with me. And I was like, oh yeah, this seems good. Like I'll get the technology piece, I'll get the business piece, and and it was just a really great fit for me. I got to skip some of the math parts, but still take a number of programming classes, database classes, things like that. So it was really good. And I think just from growing up, I always really liked computers and technology, and really wanted to do something that involved them in my career.
That's such a cool major. I wish I had something like that, because I did economics, so I'm like really out in left field. But
Yeah.
I think the systems thinking has applied, but that's probably it. Um, as you've sort of gone through your career, then after college, was there like a time where you were like, I don't have enough technical knowledge right now, like I need to go figure some stuff out, and like what was sort of your process for that?
Yeah, I think I've felt that way throughout my entire career, honestly. There are some times where I think back and I think, "Oh, wow, maybe I should have gone into the more harder tech route like most of my classmates did from my major and my master's program." And so I always had this kind of feeling in the back of my mind, and I would go through these spurts of trying to find, what's the latest front end technology, or let me try going through this programming course again and refresh. And I would do it for a little bit and then kind of get stuck on something and lose a little bit of the motivation, as can happen when people are learning programming again. Because I took a couple programming classes, and when I was in it, I was getting it, and it was fine, and I could build some stuff. But if you don't do it for a while, you lose it, just like any other skill, I think, to an extent. So it wasn't until I was actually at Lambda School, and we had the opportunity to participate as employees in the nights and weekends, the part-time program. And this actually was during 2020, after COVID lockdowns, and we were home all the time anyway. And so I talked with my wife, and I said, I think the timing would be really interesting for me to do this. What do you think? Like, I'm going to be working all day and then doing another few hours of class at night. And we talked about it, and she was open to me doing that. And so I think that time, setting aside that time every day for a couple hours to just really being deeply involved in writing code, was huge for me to get back into it and to update my knowledge. I went through the almost the whole course. Once we got to the capstone project, I kind of stopped because I was like, I feel like I'm where I need to be now, and I can actually go build stuff. Um, I'd like to have some time in the evenings back. So that, for me, that was like a big turning point of, okay, now I have this technical ability. And then when I moved over to Vercel, I was working in the marketing and operations for about a year before I convinced them to let me move into a more technical side. And part of that first year was also setting up, for example, our initial data infrastructure, because we didn't have a data team at the time. And on the marketing side, we really needed that data to be able to optimize our ad campaigns and our funnels. And so my boss, Hank, said, just go figure this out. So I did. And the whole company actually started getting a ton of value from it. They said, oh, we should actually bring in some people who know what they're doing on this, because with the little knowledge you have, you're able to give something that everyone from the product team to the marketing team, to the operations team is using and getting a lot of value out of. So they brought on a few people from GitHub, its data team, and they built out the initial stuff. And I convinced them that I did a good enough job, right? Like you should trust me to come in here and you guys can train me a little bit. And so I did that for about 3 years, which was awesome. My team was great. They were super helpful in getting me up to speed on the data side of things. And I got to work very closely with finance and marketing and learn a lot more about how each of those different functions could use data and how they want to see the data. And from a business perspective, it was super interesting.
That's so fascinating. Data is such an interesting, I think, slice of like that technical skill set because it's something that I think everyone feels like they know, and like or they have very strong opinions about how it needs to be presented and be consumed and all that stuff. Do you find that like data literacy is something that is equal across all teams, or like how does it vary?
Well, it's interesting because yeah, there are some strong opinions, right? And so what you see a lot of times from engineers, because engineers think that they are very data literate a lot of times because they're building data models. They're storing the data, they're retrieving the data. They actually work quite a bit with data, but um, it's in a bit of a different space than like a data team, right? So they're a lot of times working with transactional data and like, okay, where someone is adding a row to the database, or we need to like pull information for this user, versus a data team a lot of times is looking at it in a more holistic way for analytics purposes, right? So we're looking at more aggregated data. And so that's where sometimes you get a little bit of a misunderstanding because you're talking about data a little bit in different ways. And so that can be a little rough. The other thing that's interesting is you get with some teams, like the finance team has very specific definitions of data that may differ from what you are used to, or how you think something should be defined. So when I was working with the data with the finance team at Vercel, we had to talk about what are actually like the I don't know if it's like the legal definition, but like the accounting definition of this thing versus what is the like operational definition of something like MRR, right? Where we're providing the service for someone, maybe they haven't actually paid us yet, but we still have to count that as MRR. And so there are things like this, or like revenue recognition was a thing I had never even thought about before. But as we're providing a service for a whole month, like at what point do we get to actually count that as revenue, even though they've already given us the money, right? This is a thing I had never thought about before. I was like, oh, they gave us the money, like it's revenue, like that's our money now. But we had, for people on an annual plan, we still had to provide them that service for 10 months. So we hadn't technically earned that money yet. So there's a lot of things that you'll run into where people want to look at data in different ways and they want to define it in different ways. And so you really have to kind of step back from first principles and say, well, let's first make sure we're talking about the same thing here, instead of just like MRR, but like, how are you defining MRR? So it's pretty interesting when you really start getting into the details. And I think that's where the data literacy starts to become important, because a lot of people aren't getting as into the details and looking at all of the edge cases. And when you're on a data team, that's what you're doing every day, right? There is no clean source of data. There's always these weird edge cases that you have to dig out and deal with.
Absolutely. Gosh, I'm just thinking about all the glossaries I've made over the years where it's like, this is the definition for what we're looking at here. And that's just so critical for like that cross
Yeah.
team communication. Kind of building on that, you've clearly straddled the line between like engineering and data and all these other disciplines. How has that perspective kind of shaped your approach to product team collaboration with all these different stakeholders?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think it's allowed me to look at product from a lot of different angles, whereas a lot of times people are kind of stuck in their one view as only having worked in marketing or only in engineering. One thing that I would say that I think might sound counterintuitive coming from someone who's worked in data so much is that I think a lot of times that like quantitative data is overrated for making product decisions. And a lot of times people will say things like, oh, we need to be data driven, we need to really dig into these numbers and make our product decisions based on these. But the issue that I think people get into when they really narrow in on that is that you get stuck in these local maximas where you can only make decisions based on your current paradigm of thinking of the product. And I think that's where it gets incredibly important to actually go out and do um, kind of like what like a marketing or a customer success team might do, where they're actually going and talking to the customers, and you can get this really new and fresh perspective that you can't get from the numbers, and that can actually help you make these product decisions that let you break out of that local maxima and can see that really explosive growth that you can't really see if you're just optimizing button placement or button colors or even just messaging within a certain existing framework. You have to sometimes like really step out of that and talk to your customers, which I think that's pretty normal product advice, but a lot of times people don't want to do it and they don't follow it. So I think that's one thing that I've seen working from all these different sides of the business, that getting down to it, you actually get a ton of value and insight out of talking to your customers and getting their feedback that you can't always get from looking at quantitative data.
I feel like all the designers tuning in are doing backflips right now because it feels like a very design sort of answer, but I love it. That's it just resonates so much with sort of the experience that we've had building products. So when you're working with folks who kind of had that single perspective, right? They're coming from a marketing or design background or like an engineering background. Do you find it challenging to broaden their horizon and kind of say, hey, what if we thought about it with this perspective, or how do you kind of approach those conversations?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there are definitely certain personas of coworker that you might have that would find it harder to trust on those things. Like with engineering, a lot of times, yeah, they don't think about talking to users, and they want to dig into the data. It's very comfortable for them. And I think that the best product minded engineers that I've worked with have wanted to get that qualitative data and use that to influence product design and product direction. So that one's interesting. And so when you find someone who kind of pushes up against that and wants to really rely on the data, or wants to be a very narrow focused view of, no, this is the right way to do it. Yeah, that's hard. I feel like I've been lucky to not have to deal with that a ton in my career, and people have actually generally been pretty open minded, especially when you have a conversation with them and explain the thought process behind why you want to have more qualitative data and want to talk to customers and not just I'm not saying you should never run an A/B test, right? Like that's super important and you can get a lot of value out of that. But I think you can't do one or the other. You need to have them work in tandem. And personally, I would default more towards talking to customers and trying to understand their use cases and what they're trying to actually accomplish, more so than the data piece. So I think explaining that to people and letting them know it's not that their way of thinking is wrong, or that what they're trying to do is not going to have good results, because you'll have good results, but you have to think of it a little bit more holistically. And I think people are generally open to that message. A lot of times they've not really thought about it, or they haven't done it before, and so they haven't seen the kind of results that you can get from it. And so if you can really convince them to be open to at least trying it, they can then see for themselves how positive that experience can be.
That I think when you were framing that in like the way of like a local maximum, right? I think that's such a powerful way to think about it, and pushing that boundary. What we've run into though is there's always tension between getting work done because we've got a lot of things to do, and having that space and that freedom to explore what if we thought about this from first principles based on all the information, either qualitatively or quantitatively, we're getting? How do you balance that? Like, where do you find the time to make the space, and like, how do you approach that with your teams?
Yeah. So one thing that we've been doing currently at Bolt, which has been interesting, is because we are an AI app, we get a ton of free form text. So every prompt that people are putting in is really a gold mine of what their actual intentions are. And I think in a lot of traditional SaaS products, you don't get that as much because it's a lot more of I'm clicking a button, I'm moving a toggle, whatever, right? And you don't get that actual uh, free thought that someone is having as they're actually trying to build something. So we have a data scientist on the team who has been pulling all of our prompt data and has been doing all kinds of really cool analysis on it, where we're running it through LLMs so we can bucket it into categories of what are they building, what's their persona, what is the like overarching bucket of what they're building that would fall into. Is this more like a business tool, an internal tool, a personal project, that kind of thing? So that's been really interesting, where we haven't had to spend a lot of extra time going out and getting information from our users, but we are using this more qualitative data that we have that's sitting there to get some of these insights. The other thing that we're also implementing that I think can be pretty helpful is an onboarding survey. So when someone comes in, asking them the questions, depending on the number of users you have, it may not be as useful, but we're adding a lot of new users every day. And because of that, even if a small percentage of them are filling out the survey with some level of thoroughness, we're getting some really interesting insights. And then the next piece that has been interesting is in our cancellation flow. We ask for cancellation reason and we have a free form box where they can leave additional information. We're piping all of that information into Slack. So our customer success team goes through that regularly and just scans all of the free form information that comes through to give them an idea of why are people canceling? Was there something that we missed on like documentation, or we had a slow customer support response time, or there's actually been some interesting product things we've seen where with consumer AI apps, there, especially in the cohort of users that are kind of this cutting edge and want to explore all of the different options, they'll sign up for a product for just 1 month and then leave and then maybe come back. And so in that freeform response, as an example, we see people who are like, oh, I'm just trying it out. And it's like, okay, great. So we understand that this user was not necessarily our ideal customer profile. And so we can, I wouldn't say discount it, but we can sort of understand a little bit better the perspective that this user was maybe not going to be a long-term user. They were just trying out the latest and greatest thing. And like maybe they'll come back at some point, versus someone who was actually using it for multiple months. It was an integral part of their business, and then they got frustrated with something and they churned. How can we fix that either through product or support or something like that?
That's so fascinating. I love the idea of just open text fields, just kind of throughout the experience. When I put on my engineer hat, that kind of gives me hives. I'm like, I want a nice structured data thing,
Yeah.
but putting on my product hat, I'm like, oh my goodness, what incredible insights.
Well, and I'd say with
Definitely.
with AI, it's also become less of a hassle because you can just pull all of that unstructured data and drop it into an LLM and say, "Hey, summarize this for me," and pull out the key points that you see across multiple of these. And as just an initial data analysis, that can be incredibly powerful. And then if you want to bring in a data scientist and have them actually do a more rigorous evaluation of that data, that's totally possible. But just at a first glance, that's what we've done internally. Is we'll just grab a bunch of these, drop them in an LLM, and say, pull out the most interesting points that you see across these, and it's pretty impressive what you can get out of that. So in the past, I would definitely be in the same situation where it's like, oh, no one's going to spend the time to go through all of this and try and collate the similarities. But now you don't have to. Within a couple minutes, you can get those kinds of insights out of an LLM. So that, I think that's been a big change in allowing you to do more of this free form text field approach and be able to really get interesting data and insights out of it.
I love that. I love this idea that y'all are building an AI product, but you're using AI to build the product, and it's this virtuous circle that keeps building. How has that maybe changed your approach to product in this context?
Yeah, there's from so when I'm thinking of product myself, like right, we have the Bolt product, but as I'm on like an operations and data and marketing side of things, I also think of internal products. And using AI, I've I try and go to a AI first approach for everything now before I think about like, oh, maybe we need to hire someone else to bring them in to manage this thing. And because of that, I've been thinking a lot about the tooling that we use within those internal products. And I think this can relate also to when you're building products for your customers as well. But I actually just had a conversation today with a company about workflow automation. That's a big piece of what I do on the operations side for sales and marketing and customer success. And thinking about how we can optimize their workflows and automate their processes, and what is the fastest way for us to do that. So in the past, for me, that was really around these no code process automation tools. So using like a Zapier or a Tray.io or N8N, et cetera. So they have these graphical interfaces, drag and drop. You can sort of like visual programming. Today, though, I was talking with a company called Trigger.dev, which similar idea, but they're all code based. And what this allows is for anyone who actually can do enough coding to get by, you can use an LLM to build all these workflows for you. So now instead of dragging and dropping, we can move into an LLM building these workflows for us. So all of a sudden we can do this even faster. And now this is all code based. We can bring engineers in who are comfortable with these code bases as well. We get some of the benefits of code like version control and better logging and that sort of thing. So I'm going to probably start testing out some workflows using trigger.dev and see how that workflow goes. But it's really becomes about the speed to shipping and also just shipping more with fewer people. Because I think if you really take this AI first approach, you can really get a lot more done. And I think, I don't know if have you seen the notes from was a Shopify CEO, and then I
Yep,
think
yep.
even just the other day there was the Duolingo CEO had a
Mhm.
similar one of, we're now an AI first company, and we need to be doing that. And so I think that kind of ethos is sort of what I'm trying to do as well. And I think that can go across a lot of areas of the product, not just internally, but also for your customer facing products as well.
Gotcha. I'm always so tempted. I use a lot of AI in my own work, and we're using Cursor and things like that. But I'm always worried about hallucinations and like just bad input in, bad input out, or bad output. How do you manage that? Like, how is that like factored into this like workflow automation process?
Yeah, I think a lot of that goes down to, it comes down to understanding how to minimize that, right? I think if you understand a little bit more how AI works, like I know you've dug into it a fair amount, and understanding things like context windows and how can I actually shove a lot of the docs and examples into these context windows so that I actually get good output. So when I was talking to the Trigger guys this morning, they said that they have a whole set of cursor rules that they give to customers that helps the LLM write proper workflows or tasks, as they call them. And so that's one way. And so I think that's actually an interesting product development piece of, if you have any kind of interactions via AI, like making sure that you are getting those good results for your customers, right? And so that's one thing that's really hard, right? On the Bolt side, where we're saying like you can build entire applications and like build anything, um, it still comes down to, at this point in time, it still comes down to how well someone can prompt the AI. And so you get a wild variety of prompts, right? Someone who comes in and their prompt is like build Facebook, right? And that's their whole prompt, versus someone who comes in and says, I want a social network, and I should be able to add a friend. I should be able to write a post. That post could have images, right? Who comes in and actually writes out all of the product specs and what they want it to do. You're going to get some wildly different results on your output. And so our job on the Bolt side is to help guide that person who says build Facebook into actually having a good outcome and a good experience with the tool. So I think on a product side, when you're working with AI products, there's a lot of that there's a lot you need to do to make sure that there's a good outcome for your user when you're working with this non-deterministic LLM and you don't actually know what it's going to give you on the other side in a replicatable way.
I love that. I think the prompt engineering side of this is just an interesting can of worms, right? Because it feels like you almost need to be a domain expert in order to write a prompt that would give you something that you can really work with and iterate on. But I feel like a lot of people coming to Bolt, but also all these like V0 comes to mind, all these products don't have that background, right? They're like they see the Twitter thread that's like you can be an entrepreneur today. You just need to put your idea in, and they're getting some results, but are they actionable? Is it something you can really build on? Versus like an engineer who's been doing this for 10 years who knows like, oh, this is sort of what I want to get out of this and I can shape it this way. How does that like, how do y'all think about that kind of problem? And then also like what education do you feel like is missing right now to get somebody who's maybe not starting with that context up to speed?
Yeah. So this comes down to how you're building your products, right? Instead of having just a free form text box of, hey, tell us what you want, I think you can build your product in a way that guides the user on how to build and how to craft a proper prompt. So we've been testing a few things, and we've seen a number of our customers actually build products like this, where it's essentially like a product requirement docs builder, where it will run through a bunch of questions, and then at the end it outputs a prompt that you can then put into Bolt or V0 or any of these tools and produce a much better outcome. And so this is where you don't have to be a domain expert, you don't have to be a prompt engineer, because the product is actually guiding you towards crafting a prompt that can be used by the LLM. So essentially a form of questions of, well, what do you want to build? Like, what kind of things should this product do? And then you can take all of those, you can actually put that into an LLM and say, here's all the descriptions of, what they want to build. Now create the PRD and then output a PRD. So you can put LLMs in throughout that whole process and then help them get something nice out of the other end. So we've added in Bolt, as an example, we have a feature called discussion mode, where people can essentially chat with the LLM, fill up the context window before they have it write any kind of code. So this has been useful for starting out your project. So before it writes any code, you can really tell it and describe what you want it to build. We've also seen it be really useful when the LLM writes an error or a bug in the code. You can give additional context around that error that can be super helpful in resolving that error via the discussion mode before you have it actually go and fix it. So there are some product things like that we've already implemented, and then we're constantly working internally to think about how we can do that. So it becomes a little bit of how can of a an exercise and how can we guide the user to craft a better prompt without knowing that they're crafting a better prompt. And then the other piece is we are working on educational materials of how to better interact with LLMs to get a good outcome, specifically related to Bolt. So just teaching a little bit more about how LLMs work, what is a context window, how can you add additional information so that the LLM can produce a better result for you. Also, just related to some of the integrations we do, things like that. So we have a whole um, university or school section that we're working on that we're going to release. But that I love, I think it's super important that we have that. And I love that. At the same time, you have to also understand that a lot of people aren't going to take the time to go through that and learn it. So, what can you do in product to make it so they don't have to do that, so that the product will just work if they use it? And that, I think, is ultimately the goal, so that people wouldn't even have to read documentation. But for those who really want to have good outcomes right now, I think the documentation piece can be super helpful.
Gotcha. That's a $1 billion question, isn't it? It's kind of
Yeah.
figuring that out.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's funny, that pain you're describing of like that you're solving with the discussion mode is super super interesting, because working with cursor, that's sort of more my context, and working with agent mode, it's annoying when you're like, no, we got to talk about this problem that I'm having. I don't need you to go write the code right now.
Yep.
You're doing it wrong. We need to have a conversation about it. So I love how you're all thinking about that and improving the experience. One thing we were sort of alluding to there is, it feels like AI right now is enabling a lot more like product teams of one, where you have like a solopreneur, or just someone who's itching to make something. Has that sort of been y'all's experience? You're kind of seeing more of this, and does there come a point though where they're like, actually, I do need some more help. Let me get people in here, or is it AI like, we're gonna just run this until we figured it out?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the background of the user. There are some people who have no kind of technical background. They don't even work in tech, but they have always had this idea for a product that they want to build, and they can get incredibly far. But with that kind of user persona, a lot of times we see them get caught up on maybe like the last 90% or so. And at that point, it can be helpful for them to bring in someone who is a little bit more technical, can still use Bolt to finish it out, but can help them get over some of the final hurdles that they might be running into. It's been really interesting to see people who aren't developers but maybe worked in a technical context. So a lot of product managers are really good at this because they do a fantastic job at really writing out and explaining what they want. And because of that, the LLM is able to help them get there. These people have also worked with engineers in the past, so they've picked up on some of the technical aspects, and they can troubleshoot a little bit better and get a full product over the finish line as a team of one. Now, this is the other thing that we're thinking about on both side is, say you have a product that you want to sell, building the product is only the first step. Then you have to actually go out and sell and market. And that's the ultimate goal, right? That these people have, is that they don't want to just build a product, they want to build a business. And that's another thing we're thinking about on how we can facilitate that from the Bolt side, of what additional help or training, teaching can we do to help people, once they have a product, then get it in the hands of users and actually get paid for it. And we just released our Stripe integration to make it even easier for people to now add payments, but it still doesn't solve the problem of getting users. So that's another thing that we're thinking about, and some users are better than that at that than others. The other thing, though, is if you're building like an internal tool, or just there's this idea of personal software, where it's like, oh, I have this need. There's nothing out there that really solves it exactly how I want. Let me just build that real quick. At that point, you don't need to sell it to anyone. You just need to build the product. And so people who have that use case, we've seen a lot of interesting success from that. There was one user I talked to not too long ago who he has a whole product that they're selling. It's like an HR management platform. He built another product in like 2 or 3 days using Bolt that he's offering for free as a lead gen magnet for their main product. And when I was talking to him, he was like, this totally broke my brain around how I'm supposed to be doing marketing, because in the past the thought was, oh, well, you do content marketing, you write a blog post, you put that out, it brings in organic traffic, you share it on social media, it gets shared a bit, brings in users, and you can do that scalably week after week. And he was like, but at this point, I can build a new product every week rather than just a blog post. And I can put that product out for free that provides real value, has real users, and then I get to market to them over and over for our main product that they'll pay for. And so that was really interesting to me, because I think one of the places where Bolt shines is kind of giving you the design and like the full product experience end to end. Whereas Cursor, something I've struggled with is sort of that initial prompt and design piece, and going from nothing to that first workable prototype in Cursor has sometimes been a little bit tough for me. So a lot of times I'll even if I'm going to use Cursor because I have, something that's more backend heavy or whatever, I'll start with Bolt to do any kind of front end that I want to do. And then from there, I'll pull it out into Cursor, and maybe I'll do the more backend heavy stuff. But that's actually been an experience that I've had where you kind of can use multiple of these tools where they excel, and then piece them together. But getting a little bit off of the original question of product teams of one. But yeah, we've seen a lot of people that they've always had this idea for a project that they wanted to build and they never could. And now they've been able to get some version of that out. And it's very empowering, I think, for them to be able to do that.
Absolutely. I love the idea of more people building what they want, building more with the teams that we work a little bit more with like real like product teams that are, have a product manager, they have a designer, they have engineering. One of the cool things that we've seen is like the non-technical stakeholders doing a prototype and being like, I had this idea and like let me just put it into Bolt or V0 and like get something that I can now show you, and we could have a better conversation around it, and how we integrate it into our workflow. Is that something y'all are seeing too, or like how are you seeing, more established teams that are practicing product like using this and integrating it?
Yeah. So on the enterprise side, as we've been having conversations with teams, that is very much a use case that they have. So it allows the non-technical people to get their ideas out there into some type of working shape that they can go and show an engineer or a product manager and say, this is what I was thinking that we wanted to build. For example, on the marketing side, one really great lead magnet or SEO type play is with these calculators where you can, calculate your return on investment of these things, of whatever our product is that we're selling. And they can now, in a matter of like minutes, hours, depending on how robust you want this prototype to be, they can actually ship something that has the logic they want, and has they can actually go and show that the engineer can actually probably reuse a fair amount of that code depending on what they want to do. So that's been really interesting. Also, a lot of companies that we've seen are wanting to do these internal hackathons where in the past only engineers could participate in this, and now they want to buy seats or licenses for all of their operations and marketing and customer success teams, because these people have ideas of how things could be better for them in their roles, and now they'll have an opportunity to actually spend some time to build that. So from an enterprise perspective, that's something that we've seen a bunch of. I actually went to a local hackathon here 2 weekends ago, and it was at a university, and they had a bunch of students that were participating, but they also had a bunch of university employees that were participating. And so it was really interesting to see the projects that they were building for improving their jobs and their workflow at the university. And so it's the same kind of idea of people have ideas, they see the problems, they feel the pain, and now there's a way for them to get an idea out there of how they could resolve this, and then you can hand that off to an engineering team who can actually go and really finesse that and turn it into something that's a little bit more production. But for a lot of internal tools, you don't even need to make it super nice, right? As long as it gets the job done, that's the most important thing. And so with these kind of AI tools, you can get that far without really involving an engineer.
So I love that. I think for a long time with product teams, there was this, it was like kind of us and them, right? It's like the product team's over here, we're building the thing, and then the rest of the org is doing whatever they do over here.
Yeah.
And there's always been that tension of like customer support, I think is a great example where they're hearing from people. There's just a gold mine of like customer insights there. And the idea that they now have tools that can build a prototype that can just advance the collaboration and the conversation with the product team. And it's not so much that we have a product team anymore, it's that the whole org is thinking about what the product experience should be. That just feels so powerful.
Yeah, and it's something we do internally at Bolt is we have people who all the time who will spin up little proof of concepts of, hey, what if this integration worked this way, and what if instead of the sidebar looking like this, it looked like this, and it's super helpful, right? Even if someone is like, no, we're not going to do that, it's still helpful to get that idea out there and to let people decide, is this something we want to do? Is this going in a better direction? Yeah. So internally we do it, and we're starting to see some enterprises and larger businesses that want to do that kind of thing.
I love that. For the people who might be in operations or in product but non-technical, like do you have any advice or guidance for them to like how can you get better at this, or how can they start leveling up these collaboration skills?
Yeah, I think the main thing is you feel the pain in your day to day on where you feel like, oh, this, there's got to be a way to do this better, to automate this, to or like a better tool. Like we do use this one tool, but I don't like these features of it. It'd be way better if it did it this way. And I think if you start looking for those opportunities and then just taking the opportunity to try and build something that solves the issue, right? Go to Bolt. That'd be my preference, but there's other tools that do this too, right? And just go try and build something. Try and understand what are the features, what are the functionality. Let me try and build this and see if I can get a working tool here, either just for yourself as like a personal software type thing, or something that you want to show to people internally of, hey, our product does X, but I'm on the support team and I always see people complaining that they really want just a CSV export of this. Like, this is how I'm thinking it could look. Is this something we could build? And just giving people an example of how that could work. Yeah. So just I think it's part of it is just the mindset of trying to look for these opportunities. And then you really need to go practice and build some things with these tools. Most of these text to app builder tools have some amount of free tier, including Bolt. So you don't even have to pay for them to go and use them, get some practice, try out a few things. And then if you see the value in it, you can increase your limits and go for it.
So check out Bolt. I think that's the,
Yeah,
the best
please.
takeaway we can summarize. That's awesome. And so on that, I think we've covered Bolt. But is there anything else you want and everyone to check out that you want to share, or is it Bolt all the way? Let's go for it.
No, Bolt's great, but I think one of my current obsessions is with MCP servers. So hooking those up to Cloud Desktop has made for some really interesting workflows to just to make things a little bit faster and to automate some processes. So essentially, hooking up some of these tools. I've been using it on the data side, actually, where we hooked up a Snowflake MCP where we can run queries against our Snowflake database. And so I can actually build models that in the past I'd either have to manually pull a bunch of information and put it into a chat window and build up the context. But now I can actually just say, hey, I want to combine these two tables and build this new table that calculates these things. And it'll just run queries to pull the schema data for those different tables and like what columns there are, what the data looks like, and it'll write the whole query for me. I can do some tests and then drop it into DBT and build that in Snowflake. So the little things like that. So MCP servers have been really interesting, and I've liked playing with those recently. So if you haven't taken the time to understand those and learn those, I'd recommend it.
Awesome. Well, now I've got something to do. So this is great. Well, Mitchell, it has been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been super fun.
Yeah, no, thank you. Always fun to chat about this stuff.